Welcome back. We are now in segment 7.7, and in this segment we'll be discussing about term loan eligibility. Okay. So when a company is undertaking a project and it is at a project cost of say 10 crores. Okay. So it is asking for a term loan of 8 crores, and the promoter saying will bring in our margin of 2 crores. You sanction 8 crores. So will the bank sanction 8 crores? So that is the question. Okay. So what if the promoters give us 9 crores or 9.5 crores? Okay. We said that banks will never give 10 crores. You need some margin, I mean some minimum margin. So what if the promoter say will you sanctions 9 crores or 9.5, okay, or 8? So what is that? So what is that maximum amount? So what is that maximum amount that a bank can sanction? Whichever amount the company asks, the bank cannot sanction. Okay, they'll be having some bank will be having some policy guidelines in this regard. So that is what is known as term loan eligibility. What is eligibility? It is the maximum amount. Okay, the maximum term loan that can be sanctioned. Okay, so that is how. So how are we going to calculate this maximum amount? So in the case of a single asset, this is quite easy. This is something which we discussed earlier, right? So say for example, an individual has approached for a vehicle, okay, and this vehicle is costing. This is a two-wheeler. Say it is costing just 60,000. Okay. So bank will straight away stipulate some margin. It will say what is the margin you bring in, maybe 10%, and will sanction the loan. The loan amount will be 90%. So this is a very clear-cut scenario. So immediately we can say what is the loan amount. The loan amount is 90% of this 60,000. That is 54,000. So this is simple. When the asset is single, the case is very simple. So it could be a vehicle or it could be a house, right? It could be any single asset, a single asset. But when it comes to project, the situation is slightly different, isn't it? So when you speak of project cost, the project cost will be having many items. It will having say land, there will be some civil works, some plant and machinery, furniture and fixtures, and some other items which are not tangible, like preliminary and pre-operative expenses, contingencies, and margin for working capital. So these are the items which we seen, right? Each will be having a separate amount. So there is no single asset. So in earlier case when we said the vehicle loan, we said the vehicle loan was the margin is 10%. We straight away set a margin for a single asset. In case of project cost, it is not that easy. It's not that straightforward. We can't have a uniform margin for all assets, right? So if the project cost is arrived at say 80 crores. So we can say 10% of 80 crores. We can have a uniform. We can have a single figure. We can say the margin is 10% of 80 crores only when the bank policy stipulates a 10% margin for all these items. So if the bank permits 10% margin on all these items, then we can have a overall 10% margin. We can straight away put of the project cost 10% of 80 crores. We can do that when bank permits, as the bank policy permits this margin to be applied to every item. But banks actually don't do that. Okay, banks don't allow that sort of a scenario. Banks will be having varying amounts of margin for various assets. So for example, for land, it might say will not give 90%. 10% margin means bank is going to sanction 90%. So bank will say will not give 90%. We'll give say 60%. Right? This is the loan component. So the margin is 40%. It says what is the land cost? For the land cost, we'll give only 60%. You bring in the 40%. Then for civil works also it will say we'll give only 60%. Plant and machinery maybe we'll give more, maybe 75%. Furniture fixing again will give 60%. Preliminary pre-operative expenses we are not going to give anything. You bring in your entire margin. Contingencies we won't give. Margin for network. So each bank might be having its own policy regarding the margin for individual items. Did you see this difference? Here we are saying out of the total project cost straight away they are applying some margin. This case is individually for each item going to apply the margin. So this is what banks usually follow, right? There are cases, of course, when uniform margin, say 25% of the total project cost is sometimes stipulated. This happens in the case of very large projects. Say for example, when the bank has stipulated these margins as per this policy, the eligible amount maybe has come to maybe this 80 crores, the company has applied for 60 crores, okay, and 20 crores margin. Maybe the eligibility has come to only 50 crores as per the bank's policy. Then company might say, since this is a very large project, please don't apply this individual item wise margin. Apply a uniform margin. Then it might request for the bank, and bank may approve. So it might stipulate a uniform margin. Say uniformly we'll apply 25% margin. That is, we'll give 75% of the loan. Okay. So out of the project cost of 80, we will give 60, since 75% is 60. So bank might say that is in case of very large projects, and that is usually not the case. Okay. Usually banks will stipulate item wise margin. For each item it will be having a separate margin. It will calculate what is the maximum amount we can give for land, what is the maximum amount we can give for civil works, and finally they'll add up and arrive at what is known as the term loan eligibility. Okay, So let us take this example where this is the project cost. Okay, this project cost is 45 crores and the individual breakup is given as follows. So land is 2 crores, land and land development, civil works assistant, plant machinery 20 and so on. Okay, so 45 crores is the total project cost. So in this case, what is the maximum loan that the bank can sanction? What is the maximum loan? What is the eligibility, term loan eligibility in this case? So as we discussed, we have to calculate item wise margin, separate margin for each item. Okay, so you have to understand why we are having this variation. Why we are saying for land we'll give only 60%, whereas for machinery we are giving 75%. Why this variation between various items? So the variation is basically because of the risk involved. Okay, because of the risk involved. Banks are comfortable in financing certain items, whereas for risky items they will sanction a lower amount. Land, as you know, it's a sort of a risky lending proposition for the bank. Okay, whereas plant and machinery and maybe furniture and those sort of stuff are more regular. Okay, and then there are items where bank doesn't want to sanction. You say a margin for working capital, you bring in this is the borrower's margin, you bring in 100%, you want sanction. So this variation will be there. So variation is based primarily on the risk involved here. Okay, of some items like preliminary and pre-operative expenses, banks say usually we are not going to sanction anything. Though it varies from bank to bank. Again, you have to check the bank policy. Some banks do sanction up to 50%. Okay, so what we are saying is the margin will be varying, right, based on the asset. It will sometimes be varying on the sector also. For SME, there will be a lower margin, and maybe what is a second hand or a original machine. So that margin may vary because second hand machine will be carrying a higher margin. So this varies from case to case. What I'm saying is based on the risk perception, bank will be stipulating the margin requirement in each case, and you have to refer the loan policy guidelines of your bank and see what is the margin in each asset. So margin is usually a function of risk to the bank. Okay, so wherever there is a higher risk, bank do not sanction a higher share. So instead the borrower margin will be stipulated higher. So in our example, let us assume that as per the bank policy, these are the margin stipulation. Right? For land, the bank is saying you bring in 50%, we'll sanction 50%. Whereas for civil works, it is saying we'll sanction up to 60%. This is the margin. 40% is a margin, and we'll sanction up to 60%. For land, we'll sanction only 50%. Then machinery will sanction even up to 75%. Okay. Then furniture 70% will sanction. Preliminary pre-operative expenses, contingencies, margin, we won't sanction anything. You bring in your entire margin. So for item by item, let us say this is the margin stipulated by the bank in our example. Okay. So now we have to calculate the term loan eligibility. What is the maximum loan that can be sanctioned in this particular? That's simple. Once we know the cost and the margin, we can straight away know the bank share. Okay, 100% minus the margin. So if 50% is the margin, the balance 50 will be sanctioned by the bank. If 40% is the borrower's margin, then 60% has to be, the balance 60% will be sanctioned by the bank. So simply 100 minus the margin. And then what is the loan eligibility? So for land, 50%. This bank will be sanctioning bank share 50% of the cost. 50% of 2 is 1 crore. Then for building, bank will sanction 60% of 10 crores, 6 crores. So item by item we'll then calculate. For these items it is 0 because bank is saying you bring in 100% margin. We won't sanction anything. So obviously the amount will be 0. So then to calculate the loan eligibility, you have to add up all these items, okay, and arrive at finally figure. This is known as the term loan eligibility. Is this calculation clear? We take each item, right? We take each item. We'll calculate we'll see what is the margin as per the bank's policy. Then we calculate what is the bank share. This is obviously 100 minus the margin, the remaining portion. Okay, so then we will calculate item by item what is the eligibility and arrive at a final figure. That so in this case the 25.5 crores is known as the term loan eligibility. So the balance 45 crores is the project cost, right? So the balance 19.5 has to be brought in by the promoters at the margin. Please note that this is the maximum loan. We are speaking this as the eligibility. This is the maximum loan that is allowed as per the bank's policy. The company might actually choose a lower amount. Maybe it might not want to take this entire 25.5. Maybe 20 crores. It will take, and maybe the balance 25 crores it will bring in. That is perfectly all right. What we are saying is this 25.5 crores is the maximum eligible loan. Bank will not sanction anything beyond this. Okay. So the calculation is quite straightforward, right? Once you know the margin and the project cost. Okay. So with this we can come to the end of the segment. In the next segment we'll be calculating. We'll be seeing a very important concept known as DSCR. Right. See you then.